Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world. This is Tim May with the Tim May Show. And I've got one of my favorite people of all times. Just ask her, Angelique Chengelis, a.k.a. Angelique, a.k.a. Aunt Jellique, to my two grandsons. Angelique Chengelis from the Detroit News, been covering Michigan football. You can't be having covered Michigan football for 32 years because you're only 34. What's up with that, Angelique?
Yeah, yeah, I don't know how I've done it. I mean, I guess a real prodigy, and my parents believed in me from a young age, Tim,
Yeah,
and I've known you all that time, and we covered auto racing and together in college
yeah,
football. So I think you've seen me literally grow up.
yes. I have seen you literally grow up. I remember pushing you in the stroller when we were at the Indianapolis 500, so you could go from garage to garage to interview these guys and stuff. And I remember pushing you up to Bo Schembechler one time in the press box. He goes, "Who's this cute little kid?" I go, "She's a reporter. Don't be so nice to her." Um, but I digress. Speaking of being nice to you, I wanted you on my podcast this week because I have a great interview, in my opinion, with John Arbeznik, a former captain at Michigan back in the late 70s, who I was. Tom Levennick is a former Ohio State football player uh, who kind of has taken the reins of being the organizer of the ex-players, group, the Buckeye Nation genuflects to every time they're anywhere near anybody. But the bottom line is he's had some medical problems, serious medical problems here in recently, and this guy started this GoFundMe page for him, and I've known Tom Levennick for a while now. Great guy, but this guy started this GoFundMe page. I didn't recognize the name, and because I'm not steeped in Michigan lore like you are, and so I just looked up who is John Arbeznik, former Michigan player, starts a GoFundMe page that's generated quite a bit of revenue for a former Ohio State football player. It piqued, Piqued, piqued my interest, and my interest in peaked, uh, Peaked. But I thought it was very interesting, a little bit of an insight into the history of the game. These guys don't all hate each other. Matter of fact, a lot of them grew up in the same neighborhood, same general area of the country, like Tom Levennick and John Arbeznik, and come to find out, they grew up in the same area where Mike Golick and Tom Cousineau and everybody were from. Tom Cousineau, I found out from John Arbeznik, watched the Super Bowl, or excuse me, watched the national championship with John down at their winter quarters in what's it called, Hobie Sound. How do you pronounce that? Hobe Sound, Florida, right next to Jupiter Island, which, by the way, is going to be named Goat Island pretty soon, with Nick Saban and Tiger Woods both having houses there. Get it? Goat Island. But it was just fascinating to me. You've covered Michigan football for over 3 decades. I'm deep into my fifth decade, really, of covering Ohio State football. And that's kind of like behind the scenes little stuff that most people don't even recognize about some of these former players, right?
I mean, Tim, I've always said it. I think the players generally really like each other. It's the fans who go a little nuts, a lot nuts.
Yeah, a lot
That's
nuts.
perfect.
Whole lot of nuts. I think
That's
that's a
that's
I
that's
think
what
that's
it's
a
all
coffee
about.
brand. Go ahead.
But no, I mean, I've seen it over the years too, and a lot of these guys did grow up. I mean, that was the olden days. There was a lot more of the Michigan dipping into Ohio to grab players, and maybe not so much vice versa, but occasionally a Michigan guy going on. But they all
Oh
know
yeah,
each other, like you said,
Craig Krenzel.
and
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, and they respect each other. I think that those things that we write about every year is that they do respect each other. The programs, the players respect each other. A lot of them go on and play in the NFL together. A lot of them become teammates. I've talked to John Colasar a lot about this. He's a Westlake, Ohio guy. And as a matter of fact, his son, Caden, who was on this 2023 team, and Tommy Eichenberg grew up together. They're best
Yeah,
friends.
yeah,
So, I think that there is a lot of crossover, but I think it's also just being part of the best rivalry in sports, and respecting the tradition, and respecting each other. These are the best, and maybe not always the best teams year after year, but they're pretty much the best teams in the Big Ten, and often in the country. So just I think it goes to that, and
Yeah.
they want to be the best, so they play the best, and they respect the best.
Yeah, I grew up with 3 brothers, and when we couldn't find anybody else to play, it was 2 versus 2, right? But at the end of the day, we were still brothers, you know? Some of us more bloodied than others, but the bottom line is we were still brothers, and, I totally get it. I mean, grew up in the same neighborhoods. We had neighborhood football games, and, we would literally beat the hell out of each other and then get together and hang out. We weren't sneaking beer at that age, but later it turned into that. But the bottom line was we had a great time, and I totally get it. Fans sometimes I think have trouble wrapping their head around it, but there's something about being, in the on the for want of another term, the battlefield with guys that you learn to respect. Obviously, you hate them in the moment, but afterwards you respect the fact that y'all both went toe to toe. It's like 2 heavyweight boxers. Yeah, they hate each other heading up to the fight. They hate each other during the fight, but after the fight, you got to respect the guy that got into the ring with you and vice versa. So I just think it's fascinating. But it's those 70s teams on both of these squads kind of really, I really say without the 70s, the game wouldn't be what it is today. Do you agree with that?
Oh,
What,
absolutely, Tim.
Ohio State not losing 4 in a row, winning two wins and a tie. And even after the tie, they still got to go to the Rose Bowl. So that created some furor. But then Bo and his buddies turned the tables on Woody his last 3 years, and then kind of kept those tables turned, while during the John Cooper years. But I think the 70s really set the tone for this thing.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. I mean, and the whole Woody Bo connection, I mean, that was pretty, when you think about it, when you step back, it's pretty amazing, mentor and pupil, and then going, facing each other. And the 69 game really changed things, obviously,
Yeah.
for the Michigan program, and for Schembechler. And Don Canham, who was the AD then, he was trying to revive a program that was really down in the dumps. But yeah, I mean, I remember watching those games as a kid. I mean, I grew up in Cincinnati, and watching Michigan, Ohio State, and it was everything.
Yeah.
And it still is. I keep saying that I keep doing this job because I live for that week and that game. And I think I'm joking about it, but I think I really mean it, Tim. And it was because that was what I watched growing up. I
Yeah.
mean, that was what my father watched, and we had a lot of Ohio State stuff in the house. So that's what I grew up with. And I had an aunt who was from Ann Arbor, and I remember making a wager with her every year. And my sister actually found a picture of me. Ohio State lost the game, and I had to wear a Michigan sweatshirt. And my sister found the photo of me looking absolutely miserable,
Yeah.
holding it up. And so that was where I came from in this rivalry. But in those critical 70s years, and look, I mean, they haven't always held up. Each side hasn't always held up their end of it. And the more recent, before this 3-game streak by Michigan, obviously there was the record that was what it was. And when Cooper was there, it was 2-10-1. I mean,
Yeah.
but it was still the game.
Yes.
And it owes to that 10-year war and Woody and Bo, without a doubt.
Yeah. I think I've said this a million times. I think it stokes the furnace when a team goes on a winning streak in the game. It really stokes the furnace, because when you're on the winning streak, you're thinking, okay, maybe Michigan State's a bigger rivalry. Remember all that falderall. And then the flip side of it is when Ohio State was on the streak, they're like with Alabama fans who grew up in the Nick Saban era, they don't understand between Gene Stallings and Nick Saban. They just think it's always been Alabama winning or contending for a national championship. No, my point is, I think the longer streak really stokes it in the sense of it builds a furor on the other side, and you can sense it right now on the Ohio State side. Everybody talking about Ryan Day being on the hot seat. Well, the Ohio State football job is a hot seat from the time you take it, just like Michigan is. And although those many years while Jim Harbaugh was there and not winning, they didn't fire Jim Harbaugh. Maybe they came close or hoping he would go somewhere else. Now they were wishing he hadn't gone somewhere else. Maybe not. we'll get into that briefly, because that's been tread on big time over the last many months. But I think it just adds to it. What I think if they just swapped wins at home every other year, I don't think it'd be as much fun. What do you think?
That's true, and I'll fast forward it to now, Tim, and I had an interesting conversation. There's a lot of hand-wringing among Michigan fans about Michigan's NIL. Are they doing enough? And then they see what Ohio State's done this year,
Yeah,
and in the portal, and this one guy who works for one of the collectives said that they have found when your team is pointing where it wants to be, like Ohio State needs to beat Michigan after 3 games, it's easier to generate funds, to get
yeah,
donors involved. And he said, here, Michigan wins a national championship, and a lot of donors are feeling like, okay, Michigan's there, they're going to be there, so I don't need it. Yeah, I said I put enough money in this. And so, they're looking at Ohio State, and if you look at their collective, the Those Who Stay fund, to try to keep the 2024 guys, the veterans, to it's really all directed at, you see what your rival's doing. They're spending all this money and blah, blah, blah. What are you going to do to keep Michigan there? So, yeah, I think that was an interesting perspective on that. And here's Ohio State's on a 3-game losing streak, but they are now, whoever's fundraising for NIL is using that to generate more interest in you got to beat Michigan. So this is what you got to do.
yeah.
So, yeah, I agree with you. If it was just every other year, I'm sure Ohio State fans hated it, but watching Michigan win in Columbus for the first time since 2000 was pretty remarkable. That doesn't happen that often. And it was good for the rivalry. Not for Ohio State fans, I know that. But, good for the rivalry. And I think when we talk to the real purist fans, they want each other. They want both programs to be at the top.
Damn good. Yeah.
You don't want to beat a team that's you want to win, but
Yeah.
it's not as meaningful when
Yeah.
you win a team that's 6-6.
Yeah. Just like if Ohio State and Michigan had played in that COVID year, look
That
out.
would have been the 100. Yeah, they would have hung 100.
Yeah, they would have.
I
Well,
think,
they might
I
have.
don't know who would have quarterbacked.
I don't know.
They really, that would have been that, when they
Instead
do
of
all those, people do those Nebraska,
Yeah.
what if Nebraska and Michigan had played? And I say, I wish someone would have done one with Ohio State.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's really funny. Michigan had a COVID outbreak before the game, I guess, which kept them from playing. But if it had been 50-0 at halftime, they might have had a COVID outbreak at halftime.
That's very possible.
So it was coming. That COVID outbreak was coming, one way or the other. But bottom line is, you're exactly. Just what you pointed out. That's my theory too. Is it? Let me tell you something. I told John this, but when I drove to Michigan this year for the game, and the day before I got there, I went into the bookstore, whatever you call it, right downtown there in Ann Arbor, and bought me some decals. I have a dark blue car for some stupid reason, because I got a hell of a deal on it, me. And I put a big M sticker right next to my license plate on the back, and one on my front windshield, just in case Ohio State won. I didn't want my car to, quote, stoke the fires, end quote, afterwards with the uprising. So I planned ahead, ripped them off before I left. But it is what it is. They're probably still right there in the Pioneer High School parking lot. But yeah, it is crazy. This, it's you need this to like regenerate the other side and get the other side going. And really, no one, I think, in the last year, no school in the last year has done more from a getting its act together in the collective side of things than Ohio State has. And it's paid off, pardon the expression. It is paid off. On the two major collectives, and they're even sort of bragging about the funds they've raised, but they won't tell you specifically who's getting what. So any speculation there is pure speculation. But it is interesting, Angelique, we are in a clearly different era in major college football, right? When you look at the landscape.
Yeah, I kind of jokingly call it NFL light. It's definitely getting that feel to it. I still hold on to the whole amateurism. It's great, but college football is great. It is different. It's all the other things that everybody knows about, the tailgating, the bands, everything.
The
So I mean,
bands.
we're gonna hold on
Yeah.
to that. I mean,
Oh
but
yeah.
I mean, Tim, we are interviewing players who are making more money than we are.
Oh,
I,
boy, you
I think
talking
about
about
that.
more money, like, 10 times more. Are you kidding? I
I
mean,
know, and I was just like, "What?" That just sort of blows my mind every time, but they don't act like it. It's not no
yeah,
one's been a prima donna about it, I have to
yeah,
say. But, yeah, I mean, it's just a different world, and, you think about Big Ten Media Days in July will be 3 days now because that's gotta expand because the conference has expanded, the
18.
playoff is expanding, everything's expanding, the money is expanding, and, Harbaugh talked a lot before he left, obviously early in the season about revenue sharing. It will get to that point, I think,
Oh yeah,
point when you see the money that these TV deals, and the players are getting savvier. They know that they're the ones that are driving this, so they want a piece of the pie, and it's hard to blame them for that
yeah,
approach.
yeah,
But I still hold on to. I mean, every last week in November, I still feel like I did as a kid. It still feels like college football. It still feels pure to me, Michigan Ohio State week. And that's what brings me back. And yeah, understanding that the sport has changed, and that's okay. I
yeah,
mean, it just has, and it's not the NFL, but it feels a little bit more like covering a professional league. But
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
okay with
But
that.
it's huge. I mean, and the point is, I always make the argument, but it is so huge. But one of the reasons it's huge is because of the schools involved, because of the rooting interest, the pride involved, like you were talking about earlier about Michigan people realizing now they got to get their act together from a NIL standpoint, because there's as much pride involved raising funds there as anything else involved with the teams anymore, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. The amount of money is crazy when you think about it. But then you think of the guys like I was just talking to you about Tom Levinek and John Arbeznik, who didn't get the at least legally share in any kind of funds. As I always said, the NCAA kicked the can so far down the street about sharing revenue with players that somebody else stepped in and started paying them. The government said, or judicial system said this is legal now in our state. Players can get NIL money, et cetera. So that kind of put off the NCAA having to do something about it. But is the NCAA still going to be too late to the fire? We'll find out in the next year or two. But my point is, without the backdrop of college football, of the universities being involved way back in the turn of the century, the last century, uh, would college football be as big as it was? Because I always contend that if you put these players, call them Team A and Team B, and they play at Franklin County Stadium or the old Columbus Crew Stadium here in Columbus, 20,000 seats, you might have trouble filling it.
Mhm,
The
mhm.
schools have a big say or a big role in how college football has grown to what it is today. I think you agree with that. I mean,
I
obviously you
do.
do. I mean, Red Grange got signed in the south end zone or whatever of Ohio Stadium, after his last game with Illinois by the Chicago Bears or whatever, or Decatur Staleys, whoever they were then, you know what I mean? But they always played off of college football back then, but it's been the root of why there is interest, right?
Well, for sure, but I do think the one thing you have to look at, and that could be problematic going forward, though, Tim, is with all the money going, the ticket prices they're pricing themselves out of range for a lot of fans, and
Yes.
that's I think about it now. We go to games, we get there early, we don't we see the crowd, but it's not, we're not in the thick of it because we leave much later. But I envision myself like, would I want to go to a game if I wasn't working? And I sort of tend to say no. I mean, maybe once a year. And
Yeah. And
I know
that would be for the game with the biggest crowd, which would make you not want to go even
right.
more.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's so much more comfortable at home. I
Oh
mean, I
yeah.
thought, when the Bengals were in the Super Bowl, oh God, I wish I could have been there. But then I'm like, you know what? I got my Skyline dip here that I just took out of the oven, and I've got everything I need here, and I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
And I had gone to Cincinnati a few days before to take in the atmosphere, so I got my fill. But I think that's going to be an issue going forward. Is they've got these gigantic stadiums, and I think we've seen some of the stadiums. I believe it was Kentucky a few years ago actually downsized a little bit, and
Yeah.
I think that's probably the smart move, instead of adding seats. But of course, you want to have the biggest stadium, so I get
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Stadium envy. You want stadium envy out there. Go ahead now.
I mean, are you going to pay face value $450 for a Michigan Ohio State game? I don't know. I mean,
You know what? You might pay that, but you're not going to pay. The problem is those other games. You know what I mean?
mhm.
That's what these schools are finding out. And the pita, I call it pita. You talked about your dip. You can use pita to dip your pita
No, you
bread
got to
to
use
dip your
Fritos scoops.
yeah.
Fritos scoops.
But pita also is PITA, pain in the ass to go to stadiums. I mean, to go to these games. I want to tell you something, Angelique. I got to the Ohio State at Notre Dame game this year. Well, my pregame show I'm on for 2 hours starts 4.5 hours before the game, or something like 3.5 hours before the game. So I got there an hour and a half before that because I wanted to make sure I got a good spot, and then I did. But they estimated there were at least as many, if not more, people who came to partake in the pregame, the tailgate, all that kind of stuff. The network stuff that was going on there, et cetera. Both major networks, Fox and ESPN. Anyway, there were at least as many people who came for that that stayed for the game. Because people, I remember I did my thing from outside the stadium, and as I'm walking in the stadium, people are leaving. I'm going, wait a minute. And it was, but that just shows you the splendor, the pageantry of major college football. I don't think you get that at a lot of NFL games, number one. I think I'm going to see it again at Austin Stadium this year when Ohio State plays at Oregon, which only seats like, 52,000 people. But there may be twice that many there before the game starts because it's going to be such a novelty. By the way, Oregon's now in the Big Ten, ladies and gentlemen, if you're not paying attention.
I didn't know that. Really?
Yeah. Get a subscription to the Detroit News or to lettermenrow.com. I think you can get it for pretty cheap. But the flip side of it is you don't want to lose that for college football. And I think with the money involved, the money involved with television, now they could really afford to drop the ticket prices, but does that fix anything? It maybe makes it worse, you know what I mean? For the live
I
crowd
don't know
experience.
the answer to this. I really don't know the answer to this. I mean, I was downstairs and dug up all these old ticket stubs from going to Reds games. I mean, $6 per game. I mean, and then I found some old concert tickets. I mean, it just blows your mind. And I have a bunch of ticket stubs upstairs from the Ohio State Michigan game over the years.
Yeah.
And it's amazing the jump that 10 years ago, this really made in ticket prices, but people have still paid for those. But you're right. It's those early games. I mean, everybody knows how crummy Michigan's non-conference was last season. This year it'll be, pretty exciting with Texas. But I'm just like, I wouldn't have gone to those games.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hot.
Bowling Green was a night game, and everybody was I think the Bowling Green coaches were like, why is this a night game? I don't think anybody understood that. But
hey, wait a minute. Let me ask a question. What game was Connor Stallions at that day? Do you remember? Oh, excuse me.
My goodness.
Lightning strike, excuse me. But no, you're right. I mean, you're exactly right. Ohio State, as they've kind of got Michigan scheduled this year, at least to begin with, because they played two MAC teams and Marshall. So they open with Akron and include Western Michigan and Marshall. That's their three, leading up to the big boy, but the start of the conference season. But no, you're exactly right. And I'm sitting there in the Michigan press box this year at about 7 a.m., 7:30, and I can see the sun's coming up and there are cars going backed up to like I-75 or excuse me, US 23 and stuff. And I just go, man, these people, they really love college football. And you don't want to lose that though, right? I mean,
no, you don't. And I also remember walking into the press box and being very obnoxious to you because you were on the phone.
Yeah.
I knew you were on a radio show and I screamed, "Hey, Timmy May."
Yeah.
And
I brushed you off.
Me off like, no.
I brushed you off. Being the big star that I am, I brushed you off like somebody.
You did.
Take care of that lady. Give her a pennant.
But I mean, but we can say we look back to was it Brady Hoke's last Michigan Ohio State game in Ann Arbor, and it was all scarlet.
Yeah.
That was the Michigan fans did not did not come out in force for that one. So
That was the OHIO game.
That's right. Yeah, and Brady
Yeah.
Hoke was a Gold Star chili guy, so another, knock
Yeah.
on him there.
Yeah.
But
What? Yeah. We
no, I love Gold Star
grew
chili.
up west of Dayton. So what do you expect?
Well, yeah,
Hey,
that's
let me
right.
ask you a quickie before we get
Mhm.
out of here. Michigan has written, I've referred to Michigan the last couple of months as this comet. See it coming. Tail got bigger. He won the national championship. Then the core of the comet, Jim Harbaugh and his defensive staff left to go to, I keep saying San Diego, to go to Los Angeles, Orange County probably. Sharon Moore takes over. The quarterback is left, has jumped off. You can see his parachute, J.J. McCarthy. Many other players are gone now. Has Michigan come and gone, or where are they? A while ago when I told you about the oops factor, which is Oregon, Ohio State, and Penn State as my opinion, the top three going into this coming season in the new expanded 18-team Big Ten. Where does the 2024 Michigan team fit from your estimation?
Gosh, I don't know, Tim. I mean, I casually looked at the schedule, and I see 3 or 4 losses. And probably I don't know who their quarterback is. I mean, will they go into the portal in April and pull somebody available? They have Alex Orji back. They got some good news. Jack Tuttle got his 17th season, of eligibility.
Oh, he got his 7th year. Ohio
did.
State had a kid on their team, Tristan Gebbia, who had a 7th year, transfer from Oregon State.
He'll be 25 this fall. I mean, but Tuttle is a good quarterback. I mean, he's solid. Probably more like a McNamara type, I think, maybe better passer. So that was a plus for them. But they lose Blake Corum. They lose bigger than it. There's 6 of their offensive linemen are going to be at the NFL Combine next week.
Right, 6.
6. And I didn't think that was a.
They were playing with an extra offensive lineman all year. I mean, who counted, right? Go ahead.
I mean, but that wasn't, and I didn't think that was not the best offensive line they've had the last 3 years. I'd say 2 years ago was the better line.
It was pretty good.
Olu Timmy, and
Yeah.
But they were good. They were serviceable, or better than that. Zach Sinner was a real deal, and that was unfortunate to see that happen in the game. But he does joke that he didn't realize it took getting an injury like that to hear the whole crowd chanting his name, which was a pretty wild scene.
Yeah.
Defensively, they should be okay. I mean, Wink Martindale, he hasn't coached in college football in 20 years. So yes, Wink. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I haven't met him.
I thought he was a game show host.
Yes,
but go ahead.
That's correct. And they haven't formally announced the staff, but it's coming together. There's talent there for sure on the coaching staff, and there's talent on the defensive side. But again, the window, the Harbaugh, the post coach leaving portal closes in like 4 days. I'm looking at my calendar, like 4 days. So will anybody else jump in? They lost a pretty good safety the other day, jumped in the portal, Keon Sabb. So I don't know. And they don't have any receivers. I mean, they have Samaj Morgan, but they've got Colson Level and tight end. I think it's going to be. I'm going to be really interested to see how this goes, because I can't imagine going in there feeling like they don't lose at least 3 or 4 games.
Yeah. Because I talked to John Arbeznik about that in the upcoming interview that's going to follow this Sterling interview or this Sterling conversation. And I don't remember whether I asked you this or not earlier, but Michigan's won 3 straight Big Ten championships, capping it, climaxing with a national championship. Can Michigan fans live with a little bit of a fall off now? I get the impression they can. I got the impression from John Arbeznik, hey, he climbed the mountain, Sometimes the hardest thing to do is go back down the mountain,
Well, yeah.
That's what I think of a lot of the Everest fatalities happen, is coming back down after in the afterglow portion.
Well, I mean, I look at the message boards because I'm always curious to see how people are thinking, and I see them asking each other hypotheticals, would you give up? Would you want to have the staff back? And all, and not have that? Or would you rather, they all most of them choose because I think there's a lot of people upset with Harbaugh for taking so many of the defensive staff, which, I'm just like, well, he's the one who hired them to begin with. So, I
Yeah.
don't see an issue with that. But, um, they got the national title and they enjoyed an unbelievable run. And are they going to have a hard time dealing with what's next? Probably, because I don't think it's going to be pretty at times. I mean, I think it's going to be tough because they've
Yeah.
had 3 years of great success.
Is
And
yeah.
but they got to give Sherrone Moore some time, and more than like I always say, he had 16 hours of being a head coach last season, so he needs more time. And it's a good young staff, I think, with the exception of Wink, who I'm glad is older than me. Thank God there's somebody on the staff older than me.
Yeah.
And
What is he, 38?
yes, that's right. So I don't know. I mean, it'll feel probably more like those Lloyd Carr four lost teams that I think Michigan fans who were around remember those seasons, but they
Yeah.
also had the 97 season. So
Yeah. Well, they've still got some good players. I mean, let's put it
they
that
do.
way. And I just want to ask you one last thing. Like we watched, I even asked Ryan Day this at the last press conference where we had access to him on an extended basis. I said, we've watched you grow as a head coach because before he took the job and was given the job 2019, he'd had 3 games in 2018 when the school suspended Urban Meyer over that whole fiasco stuff. Anyway, that's another story for another day. But otherwise, he'd never been a head coach. I'm talking about Ryan Day, and we've watched him grow on the job to where now, as you well know, he hired Bill O'Brien. Bill O'Brien was there 3 weeks, and Boston College job open, and he took it because it's his dream job. I don't really understand that part, except he grew up in that area. That's like growing up in, no, I'm not going to say it because I don't want to castigate another school, but their NIL situation is not what you want, which is the reason why, one of the reasons why Chip Kelly was making himself available. And now Chip Kelly, formerly the head coach at UCLA, who was on the hot seat his last season, went on, but got off of it after beating USC. In essence, Chip Kelly, who was Ryan Day's former mentor at New Hampshire, his former offensive coordinator when Ryan Day was a quarterback. Now Ryan Day is his boss. And I think Ohio State has gone from strength to strength to maybe even better strength in the offensive coordinator position on those 2 hires. It's been such a crazy time. Where was I going with this question? I don't remember what I was trying to ask you.
You're saying how Ryan Day has grown.
Yeah, but I've seen Ryan Day grow, and Eli Drinkwitz, the Missouri coach, was sitting there at the press conference before the day before the Cotton Bowl, and he was talking about how it finally came to him in an epiphany middle of the season. You know what? I can't keep calling plays and doing this stuff and be a head coach because, as you well know, the head coach position is so much more ridiculous than it was when Bo and Woody were plying the trade of all the stuff you've got to be keeping up with 24/7. And I remember I was talking to Ryan about that. Just also asked him about that. I saw you paying rapt attention to Eli, but he almost made up his mind about doing this a year ago, about relinquishing play calling duties. But he really didn't have the staff in place to do that, as it turns out, because for a lot of reasons. Not a knock on Brian Hartline, but he hadn't ever done it, But the bottom line is now he's matured and become a true head coach. Not that he's going to climb a tower like Bear Bryant or roam the field, who knows, like Bo Schembechler and stuff, but he's become a true head coach. And I'm just wondering, from your vantage point, have you noticed a maturing level on the Ryan Day side? I mean, what have you seen that's different about him from your vantage point of covering Michigan? You know what I mean? But keeping an eye on things.
I feel like in this off season that Ryan Day seems like he's taken it up a notch. I mean, I think that he obviously knows how important that last game is of the regular season. And I think that that's been his focus. And the way they attacked the portal was huge.
Yeah.
And that's got to be partly him. I mean, he had to identify what was missing, what's needed. I know he took a lot of heat after the Notre Dame game, for the comments he made, but he's finding his way as a head coach. And I thought that he was still in that kind of figuring it out process.
Yeah.
You know, like, it wasn't quite the same as Sherrone Moore crying,
Yeah.
hysterically after the Penn State game, but I sort of equated those two emotional outbursts. And, I think that that's part of the process. And I think that he's taken his lumps the last 3 years in that game, and it can either kill you or it can help you grow. And I think
Yeah.
that's where this team's going under Day. And I do think it's a lot. I mean, people keep asking Sherrone, are you going to call plays? And he keeps saying maybe, but you look at, I got Kirk Campbell's contract, the new OC, and it says in there, you're still going to make the same money if there's a decision to take the play calling duties away from you. So
It actually says that? Wow.
Yeah, it's in there. There's one little line in there that sort of stuck out. I'm like, whoa. So to me, that indicates that he's calling the plays that Campbell will, which is the right move to make.
Yeah.
You can't be, you and I both covered a lot of racing. And the one thing about Roger Penske that I've always admired is that, a really good CEO trusts the pieces around you. You're always in charge, but you give them the room. And I've always kind of thought, at least the way college football has gone, as you said, it's Gary Mueller called plays, but that was, forever ago.
Yeah.
And it is too much. And I think that that's something that you have to get someone you absolutely trust and take that.
Yeah.
Off your
Let me throw that in there. I like that analogy to Roger Penske, but Roger, the other thing stands out about Roger Penske, which now you're seeing in Ryan Day, and you've seen it a couple of years, but you've also got to be able to step back and go, okay, I really like this guy, but it's not working. You know what I mean? I got to go another direction. That's when you really become a head coach, is
right.
Because really head coaches, the reason they have a separate office is because they are separate from everybody else, players and the other coaches, because you've got to be able to objectively stand back and go, man, I've known this guy, I've coached with this guy for 4 years, for 8 years, but it's not working now. There's a separation that's got to come, and it's hard to do because you're friends, but it can't be so personal to you that you don't do the right thing for the team. Like Gene Smith stepping in and firing Chris Holtmann last week. He had given him as much backing as you can give, including an extended contract, which is going to pay him extremely well. But you know what? He looked at it and he goes, I owe more really to these players involved. I think these players are better than this. I think it's better than what we're getting. And boom, they turn around. May just be a one-time wonder, but Jake Diebler, interim coach, leads them to a colossal upset of number 2 Purdue. And it was colossal. And you kind of go, that's what you have to be. You have to be that guy. You want to be friendly, but not necessarily big friends, right? And so I've seen that in Ryan Day too, about, being heart to heart with Kyle McCord after the season was over. This wasn't good enough. We won 11 out of 12 games, but this was not good enough. Yeah, we did some things wrong. Our offensive line didn't play well, but you didn't play well too at certain times when things didn't have to be as tough as they were. You know what I mean? We made it tough on ourselves because we didn't take advantage of situations. And, Kyle McCord opts to go. Well, okay, that's the fallout from it. Meanwhile, they pick up Will Howard from the transfer portal, who's won a Big 12 championship, who more fits where they're going to with Chip Kelly, who wasn't even the offensive coordinator yet. A quarterback who can throw proficiently, but will run. I mean, that's huge. Like J.J. McCarthy, when they needed a run, they got one, man. It was big time. I think you agree. And then they get this Julian Sayin kid from Alabama who'd only been there for 3 weeks, who was their number 1 quarterback prospect, for 2024 way back when. Then he opts to go to Alabama. He comes to Ohio State partly because Bill O'Brien's there, who had recruited him when he was at Alabama. And then Bill O'Brien, but it's serendipity. I call it serendipity, where pieces start coming together. It's the opposite of what happened to Tom Allen at Indiana.
Right.
Tom Allen had Kane Womack, who's now the defensive coordinator at Alabama. Kalen DeBoer, he had Michael Penix Jr. and the tight end for Michigan. What's the kid's name?
A.J. Barner.
Yeah. Those guys were all there, I think, almost at the same time or whatever, but he couldn't keep them together. Now he's the defensive coordinator at Penn State. But the serendipity is pretty interesting, right? When you're in the middle of it, watching it develop. I saw that develop at Michigan over the last 3 years. I don't know if you agree or not. It just, the pieces really came together, including the buy-in by the players. And you had all these players returning to Ohio State except two, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Michael Hall. But you just see this buy-in. They want to get there because they've never been there as Ohio State football players. You know what I'm talking about? Big Ten championship,
Absolutely.
national championship.
I mean, Michigan really had a blueprint for that this year. I mean, having those guys come back, Corum and Zinter and Keegan, I mean, huge pieces of the puzzle, and Mike Barrett coming back for another year and playing better than he'd ever played. I thought really got challenged. I think he got pushed when Hausman came in from Nebraska, the young linebacker, and he really rose to that. And Sainer still, and you have that core. I call them the pre-NIL core. I mean, the guys who still have that purist college football bent to them, even though they were, Corum obviously making a lot of money, and McCarthy with his leadership as a junior. I mean, I think that it's really what you're seeing at Ohio State this year. I think with that same kind of those veterans, those leaders coming back, that core, and then you add pieces. I mean, that's what Michigan's done the last couple of years. Add some really important pieces from the portal. Didn't go all out, just picking up, but people who would really help. On the offensive line, at tight end, guys who'd been captains at previous, I think 4 of them had been captains at their previous stops. So I'm not saying that's always going to work, but it sure worked for Michigan, and I have every belief that it's going to work for Ohio State this year. And I think they're going to will it to work. I think Brian Day will, because I think he has, as you said, he's learned a lot, and it's not easy to be a head coach, and especially following a legend. And I think it's fair to call Urban Meyer a legend, right? I mean, I'm not overstating that. And here it's going to be hard to follow Jim Harbaugh.
Yeah.
And,
absolutely.
On so many levels. I mean, all his, quirkiness and his weirdness and his ability as a coach.
Yeah.
And a leader of these guys who, really did rally around him. So I don't know. I think Ohio State's going to be, I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that they're the best team in the Big Ten, obviously one of the best teams in the country going into this season.
Think about it, Angelique. Ohio State got the #1 player in the 2024 class, Jeremiah Smith, signed him, the wide receiver from Florida. And then in the transfer portal, they signed the #1 player in the transfer portal, Caleb Downs, a safety from Alabama. I mean, they've never had a January and early February like they've had now since I've been covering this team. And I know it didn't happen before that because there was no portal, there was no NIL. There was just the allure of Woody playing for the late, great Woody Hayes. Hey, last question for you. Left it till last, and I'm not being a smart aleck here. From an NCAA investigation standpoint, what kind of shoe could drop, in your opinion, on the Michigan program?
Well, I mean, there's the 2 investigations. I mean, they got the NOA finally in December for the first investigation, the impermissible recruiting visits during COVID and a couple other things. But
Cheeseburger was involved. Yeah.
I'm not going to go.
I know it.
There's so much more involved than that. That's such a, whoever put that out there is such a.
They were trying to downplay it.
And I think Harbaugh was facing a level 1. And because he's gone doesn't mean this goes away. And I think that's what some people around here think. I think from that, I think he would have been suspended probably 3 more games this fall if he'd stuck around from that first investigation. They'll go to a committee on infractions hearing probably in the spring sometime. I could see them getting dinged for a financial punishment. And maybe some recruiting stuff. I mean, I'm not sure how you punish Harbaugh now. You give him a show cause. I mean, I guess you could. I don't think he's coming back to college football.
Yeah.
With the Stallions thing, I mean, Ward Manuel, the AD, talked about it the other day, saying, it's progressing as far as I know. But I think we also know how the glacial pace of the NCAA and how long it takes them. I mean, this first investigation is from 2021, and it's now, February 2024. And that other investigation, I don't know where it's going to go. And I mean, I don't even know where the NCAA is talking to Central Michigan about who was that person on the sideline. And there's been nothing coming out of that either.
Yeah. How come that wasn't solved the next day?
I don't know. I mean, everyone I've talked to says it's Connor Stallions.
Yeah.
And I don't know. And there are some clear connections on that staff that he would have crossed over at Michigan, and maybe that's where how he got. I
Right.
don't know how the man got on the sideline. I don't know. I've had very little. I mean, I interacted with Connor Stalions probably 7 or 8 years ago when he DM'd me on Twitter. And I think he was at the Naval Academy then. But I don't know where that's going to go, Tim. I mean, it's they have not. I don't think what the Big Ten, what Petiti said at the time is the NCAA hadn't really provided them anything that linked Harbaugh to it, and he keeps saying innocent, innocent, innocent. But there's still Chris Partridge got fired, and Stalions resigned, and there's obviously a donor. There was that whole incident. So I've got to believe that they're looking into all of those, the NCAA, I mean, looking into all of those things.
Yeah.
Where it goes, I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, the piece with Harbaugh gone keeps him from getting suspended, but and
what's funny though? Remember when Jim Trussell left Ohio State and the Indianapolis Colts wanted to hire him as that guy up in the press box who would say whether you take the penalty or not or watch the replay? Remember the NFL stepped in and said, basically, if he did it, it would be a certain game suspension for him. Terrell Pryor had the NFL imposed suspension on him. The NFL, man, just whatever blows in the wind and seems popular, that's what they're going to do. They're probably not going to sit down a standing head football coach in the NFL who still has this investigation following him. And I just wanted to ask you this. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. If you don't want to answer, it's fine. But how could a head coach, and we all know head coaches know almost everything that happens and who's where. But when you see photos of Connor Stalions standing next to your defensive coordinator and you're in that photo, and this guy is talking to your defensive coordinator or offensive coordinator during play calling time, not shooting a breeze back by the stands during a TV timeout. How do you not know who that guy is? And how do you not know what his function is? I mean, that's the part that just is never going to be satisfactory explanation until Jim Harbaugh steps up and says exactly what he knew about this guy. Because there's no way he didn't know the guy. And there's no way he didn't know what the guy was doing.
Of course he had to know who the guy was. This is my theory, and I've heard it from a few people who I really trust on Connor. And my understanding is he funded himself the first year. This last year he had someone helping him pay
NIL,
and that and when you think about his manifesto and all that stuff that I wrote about, I kind of can see this, that he was, got all this information so that he looked brilliant on the sideline, because he'd already studied the signal,
like a savant. Yeah.
Well, that was the word I kept using. That he wanted to feel like the savant, that he was irreplaceable, that Jim Harbaugh had to have a place for him and mentor, and so he's on the sideline picking up the signals that he's already studied, and maybe they're nuanced on the sideline, but he still got them and makes himself invaluable. Yeah, and I really think that kind of this acting on the sideline is part of who he was. I don't know that for sure, but I've heard.
I'm with you though. People. Yeah.
And the other thing with Minter stuff, I have to go back and look because people show them. I've always seen him with headsets on, so I was like, well, was he really talking to him? I don't know. I mean, he is moving his lips, so I don't know. But he was in the linebacker room last year, so is it coincidence that Chris Partridge was fired right before the Maryland game? Not for, they didn't say because of his interaction with Connor, but for misleading or informing an athlete who's being interviewed.
Coaching. Guys before that. Yeah.
And, which is not exactly what we heard, from our sources, but it was a little bit more involved.
Yeah.
And, so I don't know. I don't know. I know that we think that they know everything. I don't know. I remember talking to Lloyd Carr back in the day, and he's just like, I can't keep track of everybody.
Hey, that was excellent. Go ahead, though. I can't keep track of everybody, Angelique. What was that guy from Winnie the Pooh? What was that character?
Eeyore?
Eeyore, yeah. I can't keep track with everybody.
I don't know. I mean, but yeah, I mean, but that's why the head coach responsibility rule, why the
Right.
NCAA put that into their, but now, I mean, that, because that started January 2023, and the head coach is now responsible for everybody on the staff. So
Yeah.
60 people on the staff, he is responsible for that lowest of low person on the staff. And, talking to a couple lawyers who represent schools in NCAA matters, they feel like that's ridiculous. Like, would Roger Penske be held responsible and punished for something that somebody, individual X did? And so their point was that this is ridiculous. You can't do this. And in the past, even though there was a head coach responsibility rule, you were able to challenge them on that.
Yeah.
And
Well,
sometimes the head coaches didn't get dinged for
yeah. Well,
what
I mean,
they
I probably know who one of the lawyers are you were talking to. He's a sharp guy, but bottom line is, yeah, if he was representing the NCAA, he'd probably be looking at it differently. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Always look at that. And number two, it's like my point was I didn't care about stealing. The point was there seemed to be an orchestrated or orchestrated system to get to games and be live scouting. There seems to be that, which is expressly against an NCAA
Right.
rule. Yeah, I don't care what they stole, because teams like pick up signs. You have guys picking up signs all day, every day. Once a game starts, whatever, and so it's just a blatant breaking of an NCAA rule is the deal here. It's like going 65 and a 45. It's
Right.
you get a fine. Now, if they change the speed limit to 65, like I've always told all these Ohio State players from the 2010 season who got in trouble for selling their gold pants and taking free fried chicken and things like that from these guys. You don't go back. The speed limit then was 55. You don't, when the speed limit is 95, okay, you can go 95, but you couldn't back then. So the ticket was legit. That's why the ticket is legit on Michigan now for this. No matter what else happens, who cares about the sign stealing? It's the orchestrated system to get it done is the rule breaking. And
Right. Yeah.
know,
And there were plenty of stories, indicating how many
and the guy was being
Wow.
paid by Michigan, by the way. He wasn't some
That's right.
rummy dummy just showing up on game day. So
I think
go
it was
ahead.
$56,100
Yeah.
was his
But the point is,
salary.
he was on the payroll. And
Right.
like you're talking about, that's why they made, all right, head coaches, man, this is getting out of hand. You're now responsible. If one of your underlings breaks a rule,
Yeah.
it's on you because
Yeah.
you hired this guy. They don't hire Connor Stalions without Jim Harbaugh signing off on it. You hired this guy. You're responsible for him, kind of like your kids.
Well, and speaking of that, I mean, you look at last year, it was not only getting the draft of the NOA in January, but Matt Weiss gets fired for this investigation that's still ongoing. Then he hires Shemi Schembechler. Obviously, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Then the Connor Stallions thing. So if anyone's keeping score, Michigan has not been formally announcing a lot of these hires that they've made, because they do have a new third
process.
party vetting process. I mean, and it's now it's sort of like you're calling going, is it official yet? I mean, it's days now,
Yeah.
and that's probably a good thing that's come out of that.
Oh yeah.
And it's because they were, I always imagined like Jim just saying, oh, I'm going to do a solid for my old coach and bring Chemi in, and nobody really paid attention to anything.
Yeah.
So there was a lot. There was a lot when you think about last year.
Oh yeah. Well, it's like I'm just thinking about Ohio State, the HR office. I mean, you finally hire Bill O'Brien, and you're still vetting him, and then boom, now you got Chip Kelly, and you got, it's just because you got to know now. Remember, what was the kid? What was the coach that got hired at Notre Dame? And come to find out,
Right.
Yeah, O'Leary. No.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and he had fudged his resume.
Yeah, and he was a hell of a football coach, but
that's right.
He fudged it. Why'd you fudge it? Because he maybe would not have passed the resume look at test, before they moved on to the interview test. But but he ended up being George O'Leary, right? He ended up at
didn't he go to Georgia Tech? Wait, what's the Georgia?
What was his name?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but anyway, the guy was a hell of a football coach. Though.
He was.
And
I always wondered if he just had it on his resume and never thought to take it off there.
Exactly.
Because at that point he didn't need it.
Right.
He didn't need whatever the falsehood was.
He went from resume to credentials that everybody knew. And, man, just whatever. Hey, appreciate you being on the Tim May Show again. I'm going to get to my interview.
Do I get some kind of gift for being on it? Do I send a watch or
Yeah,
anything? Like
yeah. I send 2 watches actually, and I send them by mail. Let me know if they don't get there.
I
Okay,
look forward to it. Yeah.
snail mail. But
Mhm.
anyway,
I mean, I
hey,
remember in the
Angelique.
old days when we started these beats, you do this radio show and you get like a dinner coupon or something.
Yeah,
Wow. How about
yeah.
it? Send me some
I,
graders. Is that
for
what
my
you're gonna
trip
do?
out
Send me graders?
to Vegas, we went to happy hour at PF Chang's, me and my buddy Jeff Snook did, and I picked up these 2 coupons for free lettuce wraps. The next time I showed up, if I ordered an entree, so I'll send those to you.
You'll send that. Great.
Definitely.
That's great. Love it.
You like lettuce wraps, don't you?
I do.
With your
man.
3-way chili.
I would really rather have that.
By the way, never liked the 3-way chili. I never got into chili on spaghetti. It
Whatever.
never hit me right. I had a long time ago, before I got happily married 42 years ago, way back in college, I had a girlfriend from Cincinnati. She loved Skyline, and I never did. I thought it was just a
your
big,
loss.
for me, it was a big mess waiting to happen right on my shirt. But anyway, hey, Angelique, thank you very much.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it.
Man alive, I was really looking forward to this interview with John Arbeznik for a lot of reasons. Number one, he's a friend of mine, Tom Levennick, who is basically undergoing some challenges right now in his life from a physical standpoint. And John Arbeznik started this GoFundMe page to help Tom out, Tom is sort of, to a certain extent, adopted the mantle of being the class rounder-upper or the class historian of the 1970s style Buckeyes, kind of taking that away from, the late John Hicks, and just has been an impressive guy I've gotten to know really well. Well, come to find out, this John Arbeznik character kind of came out of the blue, at least in my reality standpoint, the other day when he started this GoFundMe page. And let's don't get into the background yet, John, but why did you start this GoFundMe page for a guy named Tom Levennick?
Well, what's beautiful about a guy like Tom Levennick is that he's played offensive line. He went through 40, 50 years ago when we actually hit people at Ohio State, Michigan with Woody and Bo in practice, where we started realizing that, we didn't have the modern money of today's NCAA NIL bills, or that people are looking after head injuries. And there's a lot of guys with maladies like Tom Levennick that are not only friends of mine through business, but we're also warriors against the field from us at Ohio State. And I do want to point this out early on in your podcast with a deep heart. The great Ken Fritz passing yesterday was well known. And another man who went through that, the hitting we did on both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
And God bless his soul, dude.
Yeah. Real quick anecdote about Ken Fritz. We're standing on the sideline at Ohio State practice this time a year ago, the beginning of spring practice. And it's one of those few days they let the media in, but they also let all these former players in and stuff. And we're sitting there shooting the bull on the sidelines. And all of a sudden somebody says, "Look out." We look up, and here comes Marvin Harrison Jr. at us about 150 miles an hour. And I was able to barely get out of the way, and he ran right over Ken Fritz, who basically pretty much jumped right up. But as Ken Fritz said after Harrison got up, he goes, "Boy, he's a lot bigger than he looks." And I go, "Yeah, you're exactly right, man." But God bless his soul. Rest in peace, Ken Fritz. That was stunning news just a day or so before you and I recorded this. But that's what I wanted to get to with you. You didn't let the cat out of the bag, but everybody could hear it meowing a little bit. You're a fellow helping a Buckeye who could use people's help right now, and you happen to play for the University of Michigan and Bo Schembechler in the late 1970s. And you were of some repute as a player for Bo Schembechler and the University of Michigan back when it was holding sway in the game. Yeah, for a while anyway. We'll get into that in a minute, John. But what the heck is a Michigan alum doing helping an Ohio State alum like Tom Levennick? What give people some background on what made this happen?
Well, that's amazing to me is that when I ever get that question, first of all, I'm from Cleveland. I grew up across the street from John Carroll, I mean, I played in the Big 33 game. I mean, with Bobby Golick and Tommy Kuzno were my roommates, and Bob goes to Notre Dame, Tom goes to Ohio State. I played with Tommy Waugh, Bill Jaco at Ohio State. I mean, I think the thing you'll find out when you get to the bottom of it is that we're a lot closer than you think we are as players.
Yeah.
And I could be honest with you, and I'm glad I can do this on your podcast, because this is just something I can at least get off my chest. See, the secret, players really like and love each other. I mean, players respect each other. If you played for Bo or Woody, and when I was at the Warren Sports Hall of Fame, and I was a former captain of Michigan, and I got to introduce, there were three of us there for that beautiful thing with three Ohio State captains. And I'm there with Randy Gradishar, I'm there with Jim Stillwagon and Jan White. And if you didn't think we had fun, and my side was Walt Downing, Andy Canavino, and me, and Walt sent his kid to Ohio State.
Yeah.
Andy Canavino's dad gained 1,000 yards for Woody at Ohio State. So my question is, how come we are connected?
Sure.
I really believe that at a player level and coaching level. I think Bo got 4 sets of gold pants. But it's the fan thing, and that's why I put TTUN in there, the team up north. And I know you can't do all that and everything else. But when Tommy Kuzno comes over to my house, we're best friends, man.
Yeah.
I don't see it as a player level. When I see a player in need, we go over and help them.
Yeah.
That's the answer.
Yeah, and I think what you left unsaid is everybody's a Buckeye at heart. No, I'm just messing with you.
Well, I'm from Ohio, and
I know you are.
My head coach is from Ohio.
Yeah,
and I do know one thing: I know who we got to beat.
Yeah,
and I get that drill, and I mean that with my heart talking to you. I mean, I'm still, I played for an Ohio State legend, Bo Schembechler, too.
Yes, yeah. I was going to say that's where I know it was a big deal before Woody and Bo, but that's when the game became the game. I mean, in my opinion, I grew up in Alabama and Texas, moved up here in 1976 when I was 22 and knew everything, by the way. But that's when I told the 73 class, the 73 Ohio State football team, they let me speak to them at their 50-year reunion this past year. Archie and I were talking about that the other day. I had him on my podcast last week because they're putting up a statue to him in his honor at the Rose Bowl, which is very interesting too. But that's when if you were a football fan at heart, forget about Ohio State, Michigan, Alabama, Texas, whomever. Now, I'd never say the word Auburn except when forced to, by the way. That's how ingrained I am. But if you don't appreciate what Woody and Bo and what y'all's teams did back during the 70s, then you're not truly a football fan in my opinion, because y'all just y'all went to the simple aspects of football and in the same time elevated it to the greatest rivalry known to man. And I think you agree with that, don't you, about the greatest rivalry known to man part, at least?
Well, it's no doubt. And the thing I'm going to share this with you today, because there was only, I think, about 75 people in the room when this event happened. And I've never said this publicly. I'm going to say it today. And this is a little catch for you. By the way, Tom Levennick was on that sideline this day at the Gator Bowl when the incident happened with Guy Bauman and Woody Hayes.
Yeah.
I was at the Rose Bowl, and we had an 11 o'clock curfew. And we all saw that game in California beforehand. And I'm going to tell you something about Bo, because this story needs to be said. When we walked back to the Sheridan we were the Huntington Sheridan Hotel in Pasadena.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, the coaches were meeting us at the door because it was 11 o'clock bed check. And if you better have been there that night, because Bo wanted to talk to the team. And what Bo told the team was, any guy, and explained his relationship with Coach Hayes, and also explained how family he was and how close he was, and to the day he died. That's how it was with him and Nan and Millie and Woody. Yeah. And the thing about that was, there was no tears dropping. What it was is this. Okay, I've lied to you. Okay, first guy says anything against Coach Hayes, Woody, this or that. I was on a plane back to Detroit. Fact. Wow. Sat that in the room, and he says, I don't want any media tomorrow about this. He goes, Woody may lose his job over this, and it's wrong. What I've never told you is you guys you have to run the same offense and defense. You basically could change jerseys at halftime. He goes, that's for another day. That's the respect that they had for each other. Wow. And I'm glad I got to finally spill the beans after 40-something years. But that happened. And there was about 50 witnesses. That's the love they had. So, I mean, I feel the hatred out of Ohio State. I look at Walt Downing sent his kid to Ohio State, came an All-American. But the Borans, Michael Boren, so, I mean, there's a lot of interchanging too. I mean, there's interstate marriages.
Yeah. Well, I grew up an Alabama fan because my grandpa and grandmother, they lived like 8 blocks from the stadium, Denny Stadium then. That's Bryant Denny Stadium. Their church was right across the street from Bryant Denny Stadium, Calvary Baptist Church and stuff. And my dad's much younger sister introduced her fiance to us in a big surprise thing one Saturday, I think in 1962, I think it was, or 63. And basically said his name was Perry Mathis, and he just graduated from Auburn, and he actually got booed. and John, he ended up being my favorite uncle by far. You understand what I'm saying? So it's amazing. You and Tom, though, where did y'all hook up, or where did you get to know him pretty well?
With Cousineau?
Yeah, no, Levanek.
Both of them, the 2 Toms.
Yeah.
Well, Tommy Levanek was I knew of the Levaneks because remember his cousin Dave was an All-American linebacker at Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And he came out of Grafton, Wisconsin. And then he had another cousin or brother, Stu, that was at Illinois. So you were always playing Levaneks when you were in my position.
Yeah.
Because they were playing linebackers. So there's another Levanek, and its name is Tom Levanek. And then I look at the roster, and I see Tom's playing on the Buckeyes, and I'm going in my junior year at Michigan. And I go, man, there's another Levanek. And then years went by. We were working at a Walmart trade show, and I was doing a private label company. I was representing this firm, and we were doing Sam's American Choice stuff, and for one of my clients. And I looked across, and I saw his ring. And this must have been 1990. I mean, or maybe 80 something.
Yeah.
I mean, this is how long ago it was. And then I saw his ring, and then and that was Big Ten championship ring. Now, see, I got 3 of those, and I'm going, there's another Big Ten championship ring in here. Who's that? And it had Buckeye on it, and I'm going, oh my God. And this is big guy Tommy Levanek. And then he and then every trade show we ever went to for years. And then if you realize, remember the book he wrote, Buckeyes for Life?
Yeah.
I got a chapter in that book.
Yeah.
That's all the years we've known each other. And over the years, we'd always run into each other, and we'd always profess the same thing. And he wanted a piece of that Michigan legacy because, believe it or not, our players and your players are closer than you media guys think we are.
Oh, yeah.
That's in the book. That's in Tom's book. And so it's been a long time, 30 years friendship. And what a great character the man has. I mean, and what a incredible leader. And then he gets the melodies, Tim. I mean, when you add them up, I mean, he sent it to me, and it's over 1.5 inches long on fine print of all the stuff he's gone from prostate cancer to all the brain surgeries to having. It's really, and the thing is, what I love best about Tom, he can't tell anybody, but what I love him best, he called me.
Yeah. And
so I felt very, very fortunate to be that guy that got the call. Yeah. Because he knows what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
I'm going to reach out from the top of the mountain and scream, let's help Tom Levanek and make his pain go away. Because he couldn't do that for himself.
Yeah. Yeah. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, GoFundMe, there's a GoFundMe page where you can join in the cause. I mean, started by John Arbeznik. It's crazy. I mean, it's sports make strange. Not bedfellows is not the right term, but sports make strange friends, because you were just, before we started, turned on record on this, I think Tom Cousineau watched the national championship game with you, didn't he? I mean, you guys are buddies down there in Hobe Sound, Florida. What are we talking about here, man? We're talking about cats and dogs sitting down together. and having a
Well,
mouse in the room. Go ahead.
Well, it's funny is, see, I got that. I played a golf tournament 2 years ago. They did a big fat head of me, and it's like 6'5" tall, and it sits there. My wife puts it up in the room when you walk in. And so we have the game on. And Tom's been to multi-games. His gorgeous, wonderful wife, Lisa, is an OB-GYN with the clinic for years. And now she's got a private practice here in Florida, a great doctor. And they would show up at all of our parties. Well, when that thing was installed, Tommy would walk by and then he looks at it, and it's like his height,
Yeah.
full size. And he goes, "Quit holding me." He's like looking at my thing, and he won't take a picture with it. That's the cool part, because he doesn't want to. He's not going to take a picture with my fat head.
Yeah,
he wants, because he thinks I'm holding him even now.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, he's a good friend for years. Tom and I played together, Big 33. He was kind of a hero of mine growing up, because we played against each other in grade school, high school, college. I didn't play pro against him because I was only in the NFL for a really brief period, but I did play against Bob Golick. So I played against Bob Golick in grade school, high school, college, and the NFL.
Yeah.
But Coos went to Canada.
Right. Where the money was bigger then.
Well, he made double the money, but he doesn't.
Yeah.
That's for another day.
Isn't that crazy? I mean,
he's going to hate me.
He and I've talked about that before. There was more money in Canadian Football League than there was in National Football. That just shows you how players were getting screwed monetarily all throughout this history of football. But
that almost proves it.
Yeah.
That just proves it.
Yeah.
I mean, in the court, that's guilty.
Yes. Yeah. No, I don't want to hear your side of it, NFL. Hey, John, give it to me though right now. Let's just jump into something else. Were the last 3 seasons, as a Michigan alum and a diehard Michigan fan, I know you are, and then to cap it off with how it was capped off this year, we'll get into like a little bit of like the salt that was thrown into the water, also. But I don't know, where are you right now in terms of your Michigan fandom? Have things finally come to fruition? I keep reminding people, Bo Schembechler is maybe as hallowed a coach as there's ever been at Michigan. He never won a national championship, and
well, I can dispute that, but go ahead.
But you know what I'm saying. I'm talking about,
Charles White's fumble on the 2-yard line cost us dearly.
Yeah, but you know where I'm going. I mean,
I know where you're going, and I look. What's beautiful? I'm glad I'm getting into this with the great Tim May show, the Buckeye controversy on the sign stealing and everything else.
Oh yeah.
And, let's go right into it. I mean, if you want to go.
Well, no, but I want to ask you to see Michigan walk off that field the other, a month ago as national champions. What did you feel?
You know what? It's almost surreal. I remember in '97 when I saw him win. I was at the Rose Bowl with my wife and our best friends, and I actually had tears in my eyes. This one was different. This one was there was just too much uncertainty going forward. And not necessarily the sign stealing stuff. It's funny how the NCAA wrote a letter right away, and then the president says, "Oh, there's no problem," and then Paul Feinbaum recants, and I'm just thinking, well, maybe that's an ESPN thing, that says, okay, we don't have the Big Ten anymore. We tried to kill them during the season. We are unavailable.
Yeah,
I mean, the 6 games thing that started with sign stealings opened up in East Lansing. And they opened, that stadium's been around for 100 years. That was the worst beating of Michigan State in their home stadium in 100 years.
Yeah. And
there was no sign stealing. And so then I went there. So I'm making my own decisions because I don't know who this Carson Stallions is. Or Connor, I don't even know his first name. I'm going, I don't even know.
Yeah.
I have no clue what the heck's going on. And most of us fans didn't. And then I see all the evidence, but then the evidence was a little too overwhelming. I mean, there was just too many people jumping on and all that. So they still had to go into Penn State. I mean, they get rid of Harbaugh on the plane going in there, which, that's kind of chicken. If I can say the other word, I'll say it. And okay, so then you get our friend, you get Sharon Moore's now coaching. So Sharon Moore beats Penn State, beats Maryland, and beats Ohio State. Harbaugh's out of the thing. So what am I thinking? I'm going, well, they run the ball out.
Yeah.
And then we go into the Big Ten playoffs. And, I always loved that Iowa defense because, we struggled against that Iowa defense. We had a punt return in that game. And, in reality, that wasn't a great offensive performance for us. And then I'm going, okay, we're going to play Alabama. And then you get by that. And then you get by the Washington game, and then you're a national champion. And, it's cool, but it's almost like they would have never won it if they were told that they couldn't win it.
Yeah.
And it's almost like all the enemy the media created with these kids all resounded into the kids themselves. And I think that what I'm most proud of is those athletes that play there, because they did that on their own.
Yeah.
This had no help. I mean, this wasn't a fan thing. This came, and that's when they used that term bet.
Yeah.
That would, and I swear, if that never happened, I don't believe they'd have won the national championship.
Yeah.
Had that all that noise hadn't made them Supermen.
Yeah.
And that's that, and it was really weird feeling, because I remember waking up the next morning and I go, now what do we do?
Yeah.
It was different. It was a lot different than 97. It was a weird year, Tim. That.
Oh yeah. All kinds of ways. I mean, when your head coach isn't on the sideline for 6 of the games, and for whatever reason, 6 of the games he wasn't there. You know what I mean? For improprieties by somebody else or by himself, but doesn't matter. I mean, he wasn't there. But then what had been built could not be stopped. I mean, that's the way I looked at that Michigan team, from the standpoint of I salute that team and how good it was. I mean, from stem to stern, how disciplined the defense was, how sound the defense was for the last couple of years, but especially this past year. Jalen Milroe, he run. Well, wait a minute, there's a Michigan guy there. There wasn't a Michigan guy there, or there wasn't a guy there when he ran against Texas or whatever. You understand what I'm saying? So
exactly.
Yeah. Not Texas, because they got beat by Texas. But yeah, I salute that team. The question marks about it will always be there. There's no denying it. NCAA doesn't just show up anymore just to look into nothing, But is the NCAA even going to be involved when even by the time this podcast airs? Who knows, right? But it was Jim Harbaugh promised this to a certain extent when he showed up. I mean, John, I was sitting like 8 feet from him when he basically guaranteed Michigan was going to beat Ohio State way back in 1986. And of course, y'all were coming off that loss to Minnesota. And I remember like it happened. And then a month and a half later, he's at the Touchdown Club of Columbus. And he's talking with Mike Tomczak, who was there because he was a rookie on the Bears team in '85. Won that. But he and John got to know, or Jim got to know each other. But he brought him over, and he goes, "Yeah, I wanted to introduce myself. I'm John Harbaugh." I goes, "I'm Jim Harbaugh." I go, "Yeah, I know who you are." And he goes, "You were at that thing when I guaranteed we were going to win, right?" And I go, "Yeah." He goes, "I go, why is that?" He goes, "Because you should have seen your eyes, your face." I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Your eyes got this big," because this is Harbaugh recounting how I looked when he guaranteed they were going to win. So
well, let me tell you, there was
I go back a long way with this dude. Yeah.
There was one person a lot more surprised than you, Mr. May, and that was Bo Schembechler.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine. I was Bo's captain. I was Centennial captain. I was team 100.
Yeah.
Because they're team 144 now. That tells you how old I am. But I'm going to tell you this. Bo would have thrown me off the team if I did that,
Yeah.
I mean, Harbaugh at that, Bo had mellowed. He's now in his 17th year at Michigan in '86, since he started in '69. Great one. His favorite win ever. And 17 years later, I mean, what he'd have done to us if you'd have guaranteed a win. First of all, you wouldn't have played, and he would have showed total disrespect for Coach Hayes, and that he was. And when you're captain and you walk out there on the field, let me tell you something about this. The first thing that's known, and you tell the refs this, he goes, "Look, we're not, the coach tells you," Bo and Woody both told their captains, anyone that you have a problem with, with personal fouls or mouthing off to you, what coach wants to know first, because he'll pull him out of the game. You don't have to throw the flag. He'll get rid of him.
Yeah.
And that every one of us knew that. That's why you never saw a fight in that game, because that was the most police game, at least back when I played. I mean, I saw a couple of things like, when we got a little chippy in the last few years, but when we played, when Stillwagon and Janny White and Grandishar and then my classes with Rick Leach and Keith Byers and all those great players that ever, it was called class, and it was honor, and there was no gray area. That didn't exist. So you could take that series as long as you want and look at it. But I think the chippy started in the last 15 years, 10 years, because that's why things like me and Tom Levanek those were normal back then.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, we all remember 97, I think it was Charles Woodson and David Boston going at it, you know what I mean? Down the sideline. Of course, that was Lloyd. No, who was that? That was Lloyd, right? Yeah, that was Lloyd Carr by then, because Gary Moeller, former Ohio State captain, who had been the head coach at Michigan, because that's where Michigan went.
Who I love, by the way, recruited me.
Yeah.
A dear, wonderful man, and God bless him. And by the way, for the record, what blew up Jim Harbaugh away, I might as well bring every story on your show.
Go ahead.
The one thing that shocked Jim Harbaugh that summer when Gary Moeller died and he went to the funeral in Lime, Ohio, who was walking out when he was walking in was Tom Cousineau. Because people don't realize how close Tom Cousineau was to Gary Moeller. Yeah. And what bothers me is there were two guys that we almost got when I was playing in Michigan. And the first one was Tom Cousineau, who said he would have gone. And Coos, don't get mad at me. I'm breaking the thing right now. He'd have gone to Michigan if Moeller would have been around the whole time. And there he is at his funeral, which gives me evidence. The second one, and Brett Adams, and that's Chris Spielman's agent. Yeah. And Brett's a good friend of mine too. And Chris Spielman wanted to go to Michigan, but his dad told him, don't bother to come back for Thanksgiving, because there's going to be no home here for you. So he got forced. His was more of a Massillon, Paul Brown type of relationship in Ohio State, because it's hard to get all of those guys there.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Well, Archie's final three was Ohio State, Michigan, and Northwestern, because he made good grades, you know what I mean? But as Jose goes, why would you consider Northwestern? Well, I'll make good grades.
It's funny, because when we were all growing up, but the one thing I will say is Ohio high school football is second to none. And as much as I can hear things from alumni and everything else, I mean, I don't know what the problem was with Jim's first 7 years or the 14 years in between, but I can guarantee you this: there weren't a lot of Ohio high school players on that roster.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you this: the one thing I am is the Ohio High School Athletic Association. And whether you're in Northern Ohio, you're in Northeastern Ohio, you're in Northwestern Ohio, and you're in Southern, and you're in South Central, or right there in the middle of the heart in Columbus, these are great football players. Yeah. And look at when you go around, they're just littered in the NFL. Yeah. And the question is, how many can you get? And everybody looks at their alma mater, but the one thing us Ohio guys got, including Tom Levanek, in the end, I mean, he's now an Ohio kid for life. We're Ohio kids.
See, I grew up in Alabama and in Texas. Oh. Texas high school football really takes a backseat to no one either, in so many ways. But what is it about Ohio football, do you think, John? I mean, especially back when in your time, there were so many great. I mean, the Browners. I mean, right on down. I could name a million guys. John Hicks. You know what I mean? Of course, Orlando Pace came from Sandusky, of all places, maybe the greatest lineman I ever saw, at least I ever saw. But what is it about Ohio you think that stews that makes that stew? You know what I mean? That you have to be a hard-nosed, big-time, tough football player.
I have the answer too, and it's kind of interesting because it kind of goes back to Chris's high school, and it starts with a man named Paul Brown.
Yeah,
and Paul Brown is what started everything, and it's amazing, what he had, the impact he had on high school football through Massillon and then the Ohio State University, which and who the man is and how he takes it to the NFL. Yeah. And not only the Cleveland Browns named after him, then goes to Cincinnati.
Yeah.
and builds it in Ohio. And if any guy could absolutely pontificate, whether it's Marion Motley in the old days or Frank Ryan or it's old guys, or if you go Lou Groza and Dick Modzelewski's and the brothers and son Dick Shaffrath from Ohio State,
Yeah.
and the greatest players ever, it all started there. And I'm going to tell you this too, and this is something nobody talks about. When I was a kid, if you go from Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and you go right up through Beaver Falls, Joe Namath, right into Youngstown, and then you crew all over into Warren, Akron, Canton, and then you come on up into Cleveland and you mosey your way over there to the western suburbs of Cleveland, and then you end up out there in Toledo and Fremont and Woodville, where Johnny Geisler's from, and then you cruise up into Detroit and end up in Saginaw.
Yeah,
those kids come from steel mills. They come from the glass factories. They come from where automotives were built, where engines were built. They come from a place when the $5 an hour wage was a major thing. But the one thing they come from is whenever they talk back to their parents, it doesn't happen. Yeah. And when a football coach was trying to coach you like Paul Browner back then, and you were mouthing him off, your father was in your face, not his.
Yeah.
And that's where Ohio, especially in that area, and Western Pennsylvania, and for that fact, Southeastern Michigan, these kids played hard, and they played hard for you. And then, everybody then changes, but I'm not saying it's bad today. I think it's all adapted. But the one thing you do know about those days, I mean, there was no gray area. It was my way or the highway. And there's a lot to be said for that. At least go through it at one time in your life. They used to call it the United States Marine Corps if you didn't play high school football in Ohio, but you did have an option.
yeah, exactly. Hey, last thing, where does Michigan go from here, man? The head coach is now with the Los Angeles Chargers. He's back in the NFL, and his legacy. We'll see what his legacy is 10 years from now, as far as some of the stuff. There's no doubt what was built there over the last how many years? 10 seasons, 9 seasons. No doubt about what was built there. Finally, it came to fruition. But Sherrone Moore is now the head coach. Your quarterback is gone. There's some upheaval in the coaching staff, obviously, which is expected. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. How does Michigan maintain? Kind of like the question about Alabama right now with Nick Saban. Isn't that crazy? Nick Saban's no longer. Isn't it funny, real quick before we go? Nick Saban, his only 2 losses in college football playoff semifinals were to Ohio State in 2014, which went on to beat a Pac-12 team, Oregon, to win the championship, and to Michigan, which went on to beat a Pac-12 team, now a Big Ten team, but then a Pac-12 team, Washington, to win the national championship. That's symmetry. What is that, man? But
it's rarefied earth.
That's 3 questions at once. But I'm famous for that.
Well, it's rarefied earth. The fact is, I was thinking, how many teams have beaten Ohio State and Alabama in the same year?
Yeah.
I couldn't look that up.
Yeah, I could too, but it'd be a small list.
But back to question number 1. And question number 1 was basically how they're going to do it now with the coaches moving and everybody leaving and everything else. The last 3 years are much a very big anomaly, because this wasn't that long ago. People were calling for Jim Harbaugh's job. And I think what Jim did when he built his culture in Michigan, and I know one of the things that hurt him badly was that I think the 2015 or 16 Ohio State game on that down marker would have put him in there where he didn't get it. And whatever, and that's something that'll always grill him, because that certainly set him back. And then he went through a period, I think in 2019 and 20, or actually before COVID, it would have been 2018 when they played South Carolina in the Gator Bowl, or the Hall of Fame Bowl, whatever it was, and they blew a 19-3 lead. And then at the end of the game, and he had his dad there and he had his brother there, Johnny and Jack, and because we played for Jack, and Johnny was a little brat. Harbaugh was a little brat in my locker room. I mean, because his dad was a secondary coach, so all of us knew the Harbaughs. We knew them from whatever. They didn't have daycare back then. Bo's daycare idea was they take over the locker room, they do whatever they want, and so John and Jim Harbaugh were very well known to the guys in the 70s. But Jim was like struggling a little bit, And I think what he did was started retooling. You got Urban Meyer throwing the ball all over the field on Don Brown. And I know Don Brown was a great coach, and I hate to get on these podcasts and show any sign of disrespect, because Don Brown is proven to be a great coach and head coach of UMass. But the point is, Urban Meyer owned him.
Yeah.
And Urban Meyer just ran at RPO. So the Lend-Lease program that happened between Baltimore Ravens and Michigan, which was basically John Harbaugh giving his brother Mike McDonald.
Yeah.
And so Mike McDonald comes in and goes, we can stop RPO, and does.
Yeah.
And then he leaves us, goes back to the Ravens because they bought him back. And then they send us Jesse Minter, who says, that's that Raven defense. And now he's gone in there. So they're all like leaving Sharon. But Sharon's 4-0. Hell, he beat Ohio State, Penn State, Maryland, and Bowling Green. So you can sit there all you want, but he kind of did it on the road with 42 winning plays. And then you ask what's going to happen. And I will tell you this: we went from nothing with Brady Hoke and with Rich Rodriguez. Then we started climbing, and then we went back to nothing. And by the way, just for the Buckeye fans out there in University, the 20 years of hatred, I felt it, all right, because we couldn't do anything since Lloyd Carr won the Natty, or with 2004, and it ended when Bo died is when our big push did. And then there was no culpability, responsibility, because Bo was dead, and Rich Rodriguez finds his way in there, Brady Hoke finds his way in there, and then we get the golden child. And there he is, the great Jim Harbaugh. And then he struggles. So these last 3 years are an anomaly, but it's the greatest 3 years in Michigan history. Recent history.
Yeah.
And where does it go from here? It could go anywhere, Tim. I none of us know, but I'm just thankful for the last three.
Oh, yeah.
You never know. Sharon Moore may be better than Jim Harbaugh. I don't know.
Well, that's what I keep reminding people. See, like I said, I grew up in Alabama, going to Alabama home games when I was a little kid in the early 60s when Joe Namath was there. And Paul Bear Bryant walked on water, you know what I mean? All that kind of stuff. And between Bear Bryant and Gene Stallings, there was a chasm, not maybe necessarily a desert, but Ray Perkins couldn't get it done. Bill Curry couldn't get it done. Then he bring in a guy named Gene Stallings from Texas A&M, who the last time I had seen him and Bear Bryant together, Bear Bryant was picking him up after Texas A&M upset Alabama in 68 Cotton Bowl, because we were there, because we'd moved to Texas, but you got to support, right? But then between Gene Stallings, who they ran out of town,
right.
They made it unbearable between him and Nick Saban, desert. And all these Nouveau Alabama fans who think it's always been this way with Nick Saban, the way it was with Nick Saban, they may be in for a surprise. Who knows? Because I think Kalen DeBoer is a hell of a coach, the guy they ended up getting from Washington. But it's the same thing. The key is for Sharon Moore to be Sharon Moore. I think you agree with that. I think everybody can see that you've got to have patience, because there's going to be a fall off this year in some form or fashion. But Sharon Moore doesn't need to be Jim Harbaugh II, just like following Nick Saban. I can't even imagine that. Can you imagine that? Following.
Well, what's interesting about that, because I'm one of those guys that I do statistics on my own. Gotcha. So I'll actually sit there, I'll get bored, and I'll go through a book and do my own numbers.
Wait a minute, aren't you a former football player? What are you doing? Go ahead now.
Yeah, but I was a math guy too, matter of fact.
Okay.
I finished 16th I think I had 800 on my SATs in math, and I finished 16th in the state in a math contest out of Ignatius.
Wow.
So I just like numbers. And one of the numbers that I think I'm right on, because I did this myself, and it was after golf, so I probably had a couple of beverages. But I think Bo's record at Michigan, just his record at Michigan, I think was 79-9 or 80. Harbaugh's was like 79-9. And remember, he went 40-3 in his last 43 games.
Yeah.
But at Michigan, but he never got past it percentage wise, and then left because he struggled to start.
Yeah.
And then when he turned it on, he went on a level that Urban Meyer would understand.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Yes.
and then Jim Tressel. And that's one question I have for you. If you want to end this thing, that one question from you. Uh, Another trivia question I have.
Uh-oh.
Who's the only university in college football that has fired 3 national championship head coaches?
That's pretty
Now,
funny.
it's,
Actually,
it's
Urban,
not like
actually,
you guys still get the best coaches.
actually,
You just keep firing
yeah,
them.
Urban wasn't fired, but Urban had determined that he didn't like the atmosphere anymore because of what went on at the beginning of that year in 2018. But Urban felt like, you know, I'm not putting words in his mouth because boy, I would never do that. But I think he felt unappreciated and whatever else you want to call it, and maybe stepped on a little bit. You know what I mean? Because there was a president there, the same president, by the way, we talked the Big Ten into hiring Kevin Warren as its commissioner, Michael Drake. It was crazy. What went on in the early 2018 season was kind of crazy. And then Urban, yeah, and Urban is kind of like a comet, man, you know. But anyway, I'm stammering, but you know, you're exactly right. They didn't leave there feeling good. You're right. But you know what? That's how important Ohio State considers college football, considers its football team. John, you know what I'm saying? They take it serious.
Well, I know that. I'm from Ohio, remember? And that's the thing, you know, and there's a lot of things that for another day, because I'm sure we're going to revisit each other in the future.
Yeah.
But for some other days, as far as actual, when it gets to politics and football, we'll talk about that someday because they're unilateral.
Yes.
I mean, they absolutely follow the same things. And there's a lot of coaches and their policies and where they develop that aren't politically correct, some and get in trouble. And some states will allow that, some won't.
Right.
And then you find this whole bedfellow thing transferring. And I always thought the world of Jim Tressel. I'll leave it this. I was at Tom Reed's camp. I was going into my senior year in Michigan. I was an all Big Ten guard the year before. And I worked the strength coach in Miami, Ohio when Tom Reed took the job.
Yeah.
And who was my roommate the first week? Jim Tressel.
Oh,
and he had come from Baldwin Wallace with his daddy. His daddy was Lee Tressel. That Jim was a young coach. And he that was his first Division I job, or Tom Reed, and we were roommates the week. And Jim doesn't remember it. I talked to him on the phone, but that was a long time ago. And I respected. And what a great coach!
Yeah,
and what a great record against Michigan.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it was hard for me every time he won because I personally thought he was such a wonderful human being, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then Woody, of course, was all of our mentor because Woody was kind of like Woody and Bo. I mean, it doesn't get any closer to that.
No.
Their passions was phenomenal. And then respect was both ways. I know that.
Yeah.
And then Urban in the end, but yeah, Ohio State's going to get another national championship. You know, I'm not calling you a football factory, but you guys are geared how to do it. And you coming from Alabama, you know the drill.
Yeah, yeah, and Texas.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, but we'll see where it goes. But no, you're right about Tressel. Tressel was reverential when it came to Ohio State football too. I mean, he understood. I mean, he's the one that started the singing Carmen, Ohio, win or lose at the end of the game. You know?
Yeah,
and right on down the line. I mean, he made sure his players knew Ohio State football history. I mean, he would quiz them on it. I mean, it was important. And you're right. I mean, but every coach has his own style, man. There
you go. It's all geopolitical too. And
yeah. I'm sure Fielding H. Yost had some people going, "What the? Wait a minute, this guy goes to school here?"
It's crazy. Matter of fact, one of these days when we're off the record, I'd like to fill in. There's a lot of other things, initiatives I've been working on.
Yeah.
That I think you'd find very interesting that we'd like to discuss because I think obviously they don't need a public forum to start, but we eventually would like to talk about some of the things in college football that we could be better.
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to have you back on because, I mean, NIL and the transfer portal now have totally changed everything. Can you imagine what a clever dude like yourself who could figure along with play football, you might have never even had to try to play in the NFL. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, you could have made a fortune. I was talking to Archie about that. I mean, you know, Archie still does commercials, in town and stuff. And he, but just think about if you could have parlayed some of those glory days of the 70s into like financial rewards, that would have been unbelievable, wouldn't it?
Oh my goodness. And the money was nowhere. I mean, the only guy making money, and apologies to Tom Cousineau, because he hates it when I do this to him, because he was the highest paid athlete in the world in 1979 in April when he came out of the draft, because remember, they gave him $3 million in Buffalo for 3 years. And he Ralph Wilson of the Bills only offered him $1.5 million. So he basically doubled it. And then Tom went there, and at one time he was the highest paid athlete in the world.
Yeah.
And now they got long snappers making that. I mean, it's unbelievable which takes me back to the Tom Levennick thing. It's that all the head injuries we got for nothing, and how the NFL, once we went into the NFL years later, when all my teammates are and all over with Bubba Paris and Johnny Geisler and all these great football players from Michigan that have head injuries and need help, or Kenny Fritz dying, at the very end, Tim, it's like nobody wants to take any responsibility for any of that.
Yeah.
And that's why I like NIL, because now at least the kids can do something and set it up on their own.
Correct.
And on that note, I know you got a boogie. You got to go to California for the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Well, you just gave away the time frame that we're recording this in. You have no idea about pre-recording big time interviews with special guests. John, man, what a pleasure, man. What a pleasure getting to know you. And it is so ridiculous to me. We'll end with this, and you can put a bow on it. Pardon the expression. It is so ridiculous. What a small world big time college football really is when you think about it. I'm just talking about big time college football. Everybody knows everybody. Everybody has an anecdote about everybody. Everybody has a secret about everybody. And what you're doing for Tom Levennick is just a great example to me of the community that is big time college football, especially from y'all's generation, man. It was different back then in all kinds of ways. And, but man, I think people appreciate what you've done here, and probably will keep doing.
Well, what's really cool is I'd like it to get the site out there on the podcast when it runs, and just tell them, because everything we get goes to Tom, and everything he can help him. Because one of the sad parts is I don't want Tom, if we're on air, I don't want to say it, but I don't want Tom to go to where that area is. I want him to get everything he can get and get the money to do it.
Yeah.
Tom's alive. Let's help him.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel so horrible about Ken Fritz last night. I mean, that was a bad yesterday morning, waking up and talking to these guys. Because I'll give you this little tidbit. We were both first team All Big Ten guards. It was me and Fritz.
That's right.
And we're the only two redheads in the Big Ten. And if you've ever grown up redhead, then you might know that's not exactly. I mean, redheads aren't exactly considered. It's like we're in our own little. We're like aliens, all right?
Yeah.
It's like we're not even white or black. We're like these like albinos or something.
Yeah.
And two of us would always be gone straight from each other. We're gonna tell you, hey Red, how you doing? And we were the two guards. Yeah. And then my backup was Kevin Garrity from Grafton, Wisconsin, and another redhead. So we had three guys in the Big Ten redhead, and we were all three guards.
Yep. Redheaded stepchild. There you go.
You got
to put them somewhere. Hey,
the other one.
Yeah, John, that was great, man. I appreciate you. And we're going to talk some more, man, because this Ohio State Michigan rivalry. A lot of people were taking it for granted in the 1990s, I'm telling you, and then the worm turned, and a lot of people started taking it for granted in the first 20 years of the 21st century, and then the worm turned. You can feel that tension already again, right?
Well, in the end, remember when I played, we went to Rose Bowl every year.
Yeah.
I mean, I was on the other side of the coin when we kind of dominated the series, and So a lot of us come from that era, and that went on all the way into the 90s. And then the worm turned, and it's been beaten up. I mean, it's been, 10, 14 years out of 16 or whatever it was. I remember looking at Harbaugh in 2018 and pointing to we came back as game captains, the linemen. And I'm looking at the thing and I go, that was 2004, your last Big Ten. It's now 2018. There's 14 years in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, your whole career is going to be basically banners and rings. And so he sent me this one after he won it.
Wow.
This is the Rose Bowl ring from 2 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
That I get in the mail, and it's a facsimile. It's not the real thing. But he goes, and it's got his name on it. And he goes, how do you like me now? Then he did it 2 times in a row, and then he put a natty on top of it. So as far as I can say to Jim Harbaugh right now, nice, that was impressive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Right? That's one of the greatest coaching performances in the history of college football.
Okay.
He deserves everything he gets, and I hope he really enjoys. I hope he gets a Super Bowl. I really do, because he says he's not fulfilled until he can beat his brother.
Yeah, and not only that, but the last time he was there, and they got there, and it was the Harbaughs, they got screwed on that last drive. San Francisco got screwed on that last drive with Colin Kaepernick was the quarterback. You know what I mean? That's how long ago that was, but they got screwed on that last drive by a non-call, and I'm just going, how do you fix it wrong? You go back and try to fix it. Of course, he still had that itch to get back there, to get back to the Super Bowl. I never had any problem with him interviewing with the Minnesota Vikings a couple of years ago, because he had he wants, that's what he wants. What's wrong with that, right?
And our athletic director has never held him back either, Ward. And Ward did the same thing with John Beilein, because he wanted to go in the NBA and he let him go. And Ward's a good man, and we'll go to that some other event. But the thing that's cool about Jim Harbaugh, with John and Jimmy and Jackie and Jack and Jackie, the mom and dad and that.
Yeah.
You talk about a Michigan family. Oh my God. I mean, in our locker rooms every day, grew up literally, no daycare, like I told you. The boys just hung out in the locker room.
Yeah.
I mean, God knows what they were doing when we were practicing.
Yeah, exactly.
They could have, and they had the equipment manager trying to babysit them, and they just did whatever they wanted to. So they'd come out in the field and throw the ball and punt the ball, but that was all the coaches' kids. It wasn't just the Harbaughs. It was Bo's son and Terrell Burton's son and the whole staff. But that was kind of cool, because we were a family, and we all feel we grew up with John and Jim, us old players, and it's really cool to watch them go. It's good to see their success. It truly is, Tim. It's fun. It's one of those things that Bo and Woody would have done,
Exactly. John Arbeznik, thanks for joining the Tim May Show, my man.
You got it, my brother. And we're going to be back one of these times. And there's no issue too difficult for me. I know my way around Ann Arbor quite well, whether the athletic department or whether it's anywhere in the coaching staff, particularly the respect that I have for the staff that Jim created there. So in old times. So anything Buckeye, but let's do one thing. Let's raise some money for some people in need that don't have NIL bill, that don't have these things. And let's every once in a while realize that, we can get along. It's like Rodney King. Why can't we all just get along? Remember that?
Yeah.
When I moved to LA in 1990.
A little different circumstances, but absolutely, I remember that. Absolutely.
Fans will never get that.
Yeah.
But us old players with maladies, we're there for each other. And I understand the fan bases, and believe me, nobody can figure that out. That's Freud himself would have trouble with the two of them.
Unbelievable. By the way, quick anecdote. This is from Tim May. I have a dark blue car. I have a dark blue car because I like it. And
don't get that turned over.
No, it wasn't necessarily the car. I just wanted to, whatever. But when I covered the game up there this past year, at Michigan, I had parked over there at Pioneer High School, where the parking lot is there. And I put Michigan stickers on the front and back, because if Ohio State won, because I had obviously an Ohio tag on my car, but if Ohio State won, I was concerned, brother. I was concerned might walk out there and be walking home instead of riding home, kind of like Woody pushed
the Ohio State guys turned your car over.
Yeah.
Because Michigan doesn't do that.
Oh, they don't? What, do they just flip it on its ear?
I remember Joe Dixon. recruited me to go to Ohio State in 1975. And it would have been like, yeah, January 75. And he had Michigan plates on his car. And I mean, and this is way back when. And his car got set on fire and turned over. And he played for Ohio State.
Yeah, go figure.
So, Ohio fans are different that way. I mean, one thing I will say in Michigan, because I think a lot of them are quite civilized. I mean, they're usually college. They usually went to Michigan.
Yeah.
A lot of the Ohio State fans I met through my life. Whenever I walk around in airports for years, when I'd wear Michigan anything, I'd get catcalled. Finally, my wife said to me, "Where are your Rose Bowl rings?" And I got 3 of them. So I'd start wearing them, and my captain ring, 4 of them. Yeah. And I would just walk in there and I go, like I said, and I found out that 85% of them never went to Ohio State.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's what bothered me the most. Is that and so Ohio's really a pro team. Ohio State's a pro team because we're not even loved in Michigan. You got to understand, Michigan State has a lot more students than we did. Almost everybody in Michigan State came from the state of Michigan. Michigan's international. It's out of state. It's expensive. It's like a Stanford or Harvard. And we never the Michigan State Police Academy is in Michigan. It's in East Lansing. And so I used to hide my Rose Bowl rings when I got pulled over by a state trooper because I knew they were going to write me a bad one because they'd see the Michigan on it.
Wow. Well, that brings a question. How many times you get pulled over?
Twice.
Yeah.
Twice. Well, I used to fly. I had that lead foot,
Yeah, I'm with you, man. I know what you're saying. Hey, I hear you. But I will say this. Buckeye Nation is a real thing. It is, like you just pointed out.
It's obvious.
It is a real thing, and it's kind of amazing when it's kind of amazing to see it because I've seen the ebbs and the flows, of the tides, covering Ohio State football since '84 and being around it before then. I mean, I talk to Bo all the time. I'm not all the time, but I talk to Bo a lot, and he and Woody were just different, man. And it was, the thing I liked, believe it or not, the thing I liked about Ryan Day and Jim Harbaugh versus each other is they were totally different people, and in all kinds of ways. I don't think there was any love lost between those two guys. I think anybody could sense that. Whereas with Woody and Bo, you knew that no matter what, there was something way down deep that these guys liked each other. You know what I mean? A lot. Nowadays, you don't get that sense, right? I mean, at least I don't. And
they're best friends. They were best friends. And at the end, Chemi told me the story best, Bo's son. At the very end of when Woody was dying, he came to visit Bo the year before. And went to their house, and Chemi was a little kid, and Woody went right by, walked right by Bo at the car, and so Chemi he put his hand on his hair and shook it, and went, "Where's my girl Millie?"
Yeah.
And walked right in there,
yeah,
and just that's the respect that they had for each other. I was at the Latin Club in Columbus when Bill Joseph ran it, and when we did we did. I was in the first table, so I could hear Bo and Woody talking, and it was the Woody Hayes roast, because the next event after that was his eulogy, and Bo did both of them. I
was there too. Go ahead.
Yeah, and we're in the front page, and remember when Woody looks over to Bo, and when he's introducing him, and he goes, "Damn you, Bo, for 1969." Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it didn't matter. That's the one that stuck in Woody's craw.
Yeah.
That was his greatest team. That had a 30-game winning streak, right?
Yeah.
That was the next Oakland Raiders, they said. They're the best team in football.
Yeah. Yeah.
That one hurt.
Yeah.
On that note.
There's something else coming. But we'll get to that.
No, I don't have anything else. I just figured we had fun today, and anytime you want.
Hey, John, I hope you didn't miss your tea time, my man. I hope I don't miss my flight. But ladies and
gentlemen, that's why I'm about to get out of here. Yeah, I got 2:00. So,
John Arbeznik, man, thank you for joining the Tim May Show. Let's do it again, all right?
Hey, honor, sir. Really enjoyed it. And hi, Buckeye Nation. Believe me, we're not that bad of people, but let's get some money for Tommy Levanek.
Amen.